The phone on my nightstand vibrated with a sharp, abrupt buzz at exactly 6 in the morning. Outside, the neighborhood was still draped in the quiet blue dark of early dawn. I reached out my fingers, finding the cold glass screen, and squinted against the sudden harsh light. The text message was from Chloe, my only daughter. "Mom, the plan has changed. You're not coming on the cruise next week. Brenda really wants just her family there. You understand, right? We'll bring you back a souvenir." I stared at the screen. The glowing words felt entirely detached from the reality of my life. Brenda was my daughter's mother-in-law. The cruise in question was a 3-week luxury voyage to Alaska, booked a year in advance. I had paid $45,000 for the grand family suite. Every single cent came from my own savings. It was meant to be a memorial trip to honor my late husband, a man who had worked his entire life dreaming of seeing the glaciers, but passed away before he ever got the chance. Chloe and her husband Mark had lived in my 4-bedroom house rent-free for the past 3 years. They claimed they were saving for a down payment, though Amazon packages arrived daily. I had folded their laundry, cooked their meals, and stepped out of their way. Now my own daughter was booting me off the trip I financed, so her mother-in-law could enjoy my husband's memorial vacation. I didn't burst into tears. I didn't throw the phone against the wall. I simply set the device face down on the wooden nightstand. I threw off the covers, walked down the hallway to the kitchen, and filled the kettle. I watched the water boil, my reflection steady in the dark window glass. Chloe was right about one thing. The plan had definitely changed. By 8 o'clock, the house was awake. I sat at the kitchen island, quietly sipping my black tea. Chloe walked in, dressed in her expensive workout clothes, typing furiously on her phone. She didn't look up. She didn't apologize. She just opened the refrigerator and complained that we were out of almond milk. Mark followed shortly after, yawning loudly. And then the front door chimed. Brenda walked in without knocking. She had her own key given to her by Mark months ago, without my permission. "Morning, everyone." Brenda chimed, dropping her designer handbag on my clean dining table. She immediately went to the cupboards and pulled out my favorite ceramic mug. "Chloe, honey, did you pack the matching sun hats I bought for the deck parties?" "Already in the suitcase." Chloe smiled, handing her mother-in-law a fresh cup of coffee. I sat there completely invisible in my own home. This had been the pattern for 2 years. They treated my house like a free hotel and me like the invisible staff. Brenda hosted her weekly book club in my living room, ordering me to keep the noise down if I tried to watch television. Chloe constantly reminded me how outdated my furniture was. Mark complained about the water pressure. They consumed my space, my resources, and my peace. Yesterday, I had noticed my brand new winter coat missing from the hall closet. I saw it draped over Brenda's chair. I had ignored it, assuming it was a mistake. Now, looking at the 3 of them chatting excitedly about glacier excursions and midnight buffets, the final piece clicked into place. They had planned this hijacking for weeks. I finished my tea, rinsed my cup, and walked quietly back to my study. I closed the door to my study and sat at my desk. My laptop screen flickered to life. I didn't need to call Chloe in here. I didn't need an explosive argument that would end in her gaslighting me or playing the victim. Words meant nothing in this house anymore. I needed to act. I logged into the cruise line's official portal. I typed in the booking reference number and my email address. The itinerary loaded on the screen. There it was in bold, black letters. Passenger 1, Brenda. Passenger 2, Chloe. Passenger 3, Mark. Passenger 4, blank. My name had been completely erased from the manifest. They had used the confirmation email to log in and change the names. But Chloe, in her arrogant rush, had forgotten a massive administrative detail. She wasn't the primary account holder. The credit card linked to the reservation, the account that funded the entire $45,000 package, belonged solely to Beverly Sanders. I moved my mouse to the top right corner of the screen. I clicked on Manage Booking. A drop-down menu appeared. I scrolled past Modify Guests and clicked directly on Cancel Entire Reservation. A warning box popped up asking if I was sure. Because the departure date was exactly 7 days away, the cancellation policy allowed an 80% refund, with the rest issued as future travel credits to the cardholder. I didn't hesitate. I clicked Confirm. The page refreshed. A green checkmark appeared, followed by a receipt showing $36,000 routing back to my personal bank account. I closed the laptop. No arguments. No tears. I walked out of the study and past the kitchen. Chloe was showing Brenda photos of the ship's fine dining restaurant. Let them pack. Let them dream. The house felt suffocating. It was a beautiful property paid off completely by my husband and me decades ago. But the walls were now stained with the disrespect of my daughter and her husband. I realized that canceling the cruise was only the first step. If I stayed here, I would remain their live-in maid. I would endure the endless intrusion of Brenda and the quiet arrogance of Mark. I opened my phone browser and searched for local real estate investors. I didn't want the hassle of staging the house hosting open houses or waiting months for a buyer. I found a local firm with a bold banner, "We buy houses as is. Fast cash. 10-day closing." I dialed the number. A man named Greg answered. I explained the property size, the location, and my need for speed. He promised to drop by at noon. At 11:30 a.m., Chloe yelled up the stairs, "Mom, Mark and I are taking Brenda out to lunch and then shopping for formal wear. Don't forget to run the dishwasher." The front door slammed. 20 minutes later, Greg arrived. He was professional and quick. He walked through the 4 bedrooms, inspected the foundation, and noted the neighborhood. We sat at the kitchen island. He slid a piece of paper toward me. The offer was 20% below market value, but it was all cash, and the closing date was set for next Friday. Coincidentally, next Friday was the exact day my daughter's cruise was supposed to depart. I pulled a pen from my purse. I didn't negotiate. I signed my name on the dotted line. The house was sold. The deadline was set. The next few days became a masterclass in quiet efficiency. Chloe and Mark were entirely consumed by their upcoming vacation. Amazon boxes filled with snorkeling gear, evening gowns, and travel accessories piled up on the porch. While they were busy obsessing over themselves, I went to work. I visited a local storage facility and rented a small climate-controlled unit. I began packing my life into sturdy cardboard boxes. I didn't touch the furniture. I only took what truly mattered: photo albums, important documents, family heirlooms, my jewelry, and my clothes. One evening, I was carrying a taped box out to the trunk of my car. Chloe was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. She glanced over. "Finally doing some decluttering, Mom." She smirked, not offering to help. "Good. Brenda said the guest room feels a bit cramped with all your old sewing stuff. While we're gone next week, you should really clear out the garage too. Mark wants to put a home gym in there." I slid the box into the trunk and closed it firmly. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. I saw the greed in her eyes, the complete lack of empathy. "I'm clearing out exactly what needs to be cleared out," I replied evenly. "Great," Chloe muttered, already back to her phone screen. "Oh, and make sure the fridge is stocked for when we get back. We're going to be exhausted." I walked back inside, went to my bedroom, and locked the door. I pulled out my tablet and booked a one-way first-class ticket to Florence, Italy. The departure time was Friday afternoon. Everything was perfectly aligned. Friday morning arrived with a chaotic rush. Chloe, Mark, and Brenda were running around the house, dragging massive suitcases down the hardwood stairs. Mark was sweating, cursing at a broken zipper, while Brenda stood by the front door wearing a giant sun hat and reapplying her lipstick. "Hurry up, Mark. The Uber is waiting," Chloe snapped. She turned to me, handing over a folded piece of paper. "Here is the chore list. Water the plants, sign for my packages, and make sure the security system is armed at night. We'll be back in 21 days. Not a single thank you. Not a single, "Sorry, you aren't coming." "Have a memorable trip," I said, my voice smooth and calm. Brenda scoffed, adjusting her sunglasses. "We will, Beverly. Try not to break anything while we're away." They piled into the black SUV idling in the driveway. I stood on the porch, my hands tucked into the pockets of my cardigan, and watched the car pull away. The moment the vehicle turned the corner and disappeared out of sight, I stepped back inside. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed my final 2 suitcases. 10 minutes later, Greg's truck pulled up to the curb. He stepped out, holding a manila folder containing the final closing documents and the confirmation of the wire transfer. The money was already safely sitting in my new private bank account. "Ready to hand over the keys, Beverly?" Greg asked, looking at the house with an investor's eager eye. "More than ready," I replied. I signed the last page, handed him my heavy metal key, and walked to my car. I arrived at the airport 3 hours before my flight to Italy. I checked my bags, passed through security, and found a quiet corner in the first-class lounge. I ordered a sparkling water and set my phone on the table. At 1:15 p.m., the screen lit up. It was a text from Chloe. "Mom, did you get an email from the cruise line? The kiosk at the port isn't printing our boarding passes." I took a sip of my water. I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, the phone buzzed again. "Mom, answer me." "The agent is saying the reservation is canceled." What is going on? Then came the phone calls, one after another. I watched her name flash on the screen in silence. I waited until I finished my drink. When the 7th call ended and went to voicemail, I finally picked up the phone and typed my response. The plan changed, Chloe. Since Brenda only wanted her family there, I canceled my reservation. And since I paid for it, the $45,000 was refunded to my card. "Have a wonderful time at the port." The response was instantaneous. A barrage of all-caps messages flooded my screen. "Are you crazy? We are standing here with all our luggage. Brenda is crying. How could you do this to us? Book it again, right now. Fix this." I didn't feel a shred of guilt. I didn't feel the urge to argue. I blocked her number, then blocked Mark's number. I opened my banking app, transferred a generous amount to my checking account for my trip, and walked toward my departure gate. The plane was boarding. While I was soaring somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, the reality on the ground was moving fast. Greg didn't waste any time. The moment I had handed him the keys, his renovation crew was dispatched to the property. I had left Greg with one specific instruction regarding the remaining belongings in the house. "I have taken my property," I told him. "Whatever is left inside those bedrooms belongs to the previous tenants. They have no legal lease, no rent history, and no rights to the property. You can dispose of it however you see fit." Greg, being a ruthless house flipper, simply nodded. He didn't care about designer clothes or expensive gaming setups. He cared about clearing the floor plan for new hardwood and fresh paint. He changed every lock on the exterior doors within an hour of my departure. A massive white construction dumpster was dropped right into the middle of the driveway. The crew worked quickly. Chloe's expensive vanity mirror, Mark's high-end gaming chair, the mountain of shoes, the unnecessary kitchen gadgets, it all went flying out the front door and into the metal bin. They weren't gentle. They were clearing garbage. Brenda's book club chairs were tossed into the yard. The house that had been a suffocating prison for me was being gutted. By the time I landed in Europe, navigating the beautiful, chaotic streets of Florence to my rented villa, the house back in the States was entirely unrecognizable. It was empty, locked, and no longer mine. 21 days later, the reality of their grand vacation came to a crushing end. Chloe and Mark hadn't seen a single Alaskan glacier. Instead of sipping champagne on a private deck, they had spent 3 miserable weeks trapped in a dingy airport motel that smelled heavily of cheap bleach and stale cigarettes. Brenda, instantly stripped of her expected luxury, had thrown a massive, humiliating tantrum in the lobby on day 2 and flown back home early, refusing to speak to either of them. Forced to max out their own high-interest credit cards just to afford fast food and the daily room rate, Chloe and Mark were pushed to their absolute breaking point. An exhausted, furious Chloe dragged her scuffed suitcase up the familiar driveway. With every heavy step, she was rehearsing the exact screams, demands, and vicious insults she was going to hurl at me the moment I opened the door. She fully expected me to be inside, cowering in guilt, ready to apologize and serve them a hot meal. Mark trailed a few steps behind her, looking miserable and completely defeated. His shoulders slumped under the weight of their new debt. Chloe stomped up to the porch, her jaw set in pure entitlement, and jammed her key into the front door. It didn't slide in. She frowned, violently jiggling the metal, but the keyway was entirely different. Staring back at her was a heavy, shiny, new brass lock. "Mom, open the door!" She screamed, her voice cracking as she pounded her fists aggressively against the solid wood. "Stop playing games and let us in right now." Mark walked up slowly, his eyes widening as he finally stopped looking at his feet and noticed the surroundings. "Chloe." "Look." Chloe turned. Sitting dead center in the driveway was a massive industrial construction dumpster. Sticking out from the top of a pile of shattered drywall, rusted pipes, and old yellow insulation was the unmistakable fur-lined sleeve of her $800 winter coat. Beside it lay Mark's smashed computer monitor, its screen spider-webbed with cracks resting carelessly on top of her ruined designer shoeboxes. The color drained from her face. Cold panic instantly replaced her burning anger. Chloe dropped her suitcase and sprinted around to the back of the house, peering desperately through the sliding glass doors. The living room was entirely gutted. The plush furniture she loved to lounge on was gone. The carpets had been violently ripped up, exposing the bare, dusty subfloor. Right at eye level, a large, bright neon sticker was slapped onto the glass property of Gregson Investments. Under renovation. Trespassers will be prosecuted. She pulled out her phone, her hands shaking so violently she could barely unlock the screen. She dialed my number, desperate to scream demand and beg. But there was no ringing. Just the cold, automated voice of her carrier informing her that the number was permanently unavailable. Standing in the driveway of a house she no longer had access to, surrounded by the literal trash of her former life, the truth finally hit her. She had no home, she had no belongings, and she had no mother left to bail her out. The morning sun warmed the stone tiles of my balcony. I sat at a small iron table, a cup of rich Italian espresso in my hand, looking out over rolling green vineyards that stretched toward the horizon. The air smelled like earth and sweet grapes. Down below, the elderly owner of the local bakery waved at me, holding up a fresh bag of pastries. I smiled and waved back. There was no one demanding my attention here. No laundry to fold, no passive-aggressive comments to ignore, and no ungrateful guests treating me like a ghost in my own space. I opened my tablet. I had unblocked Chloe's email address purely out of curiosity. There was a long, frantic message sitting in my inbox, sent at 3 a.m. my time. "Mom, what did you do? Our house is locked. Our stuff is in a dumpster. A man named Greg told the police he owns the house and we are trespassing. Where are you? You need to come back and fix this right now. We have nowhere to go." We asked Brenda if we could stay with her, but she said her guest room is strictly for her bridge club and she doesn't want the drama. Mark is literally crying in the rental car. Please, pick up the phone. I read the words twice. 2 years ago, a message like that would have sent me into a panic. I would have rushed to fix their mistakes, to shelter them, to apologize for things I didn't even do. I would have felt guilty that Brenda abandoned them, even though it was entirely predictable. Brenda only liked them when they were a free ticket to luxury. Without my house and my money, Chloe and Mark were completely useless to her. Sitting here thousands of miles away, I felt absolutely nothing but peace. The foundation of their entitlement had finally crumbled, and I wasn't going to be the one to sweep up the dust. I set my espresso down. I tapped reply. Chloe, the house belonged to me, and I sold it. You and Mark are adults. You have jobs. You will figure out where to live just like everyone else does. Do not contact me again. I am enjoying my retirement. I press send. Then I permanently deleted her email contact from my device. I closed the tablet, picked up my coffee, and leaned back in my chair. For the first time in a very long time, I took a deep breath, and the air belonged entirely to me. If you found satisfaction in seeing a mother finally stand up for herself, stop being treated like a doormat, and set real boundaries, please do me a quick favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories. Leave a 100 in the comments below if you agree that respect should always be earned, not expected. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.